Good.
Oh my gosh. Did you see that?
Hey guys, welcome back to Cool Bike Projects. Glad to see you again. This week we're finally taking on the bike project called Swamp Thing. This is a relatively new Huffy mountain bike that was found in the canal almost a year ago. It's been sitting on the shelf asking me for a long time to see if we couldn't restore this poor thing. And really today, as we begin taking this thing apart and trying to get it back together, I want to try and investigate what would happen to a bike if it sat in the water for more than a year. And could you reasonably salvage most of the parts? Well, this week we're going to find out. Enjoy. Oh man, that is a lot of rust. This one still works, I guess. When it comes to the moss, I think this is something that should be sent off to a biochemical lab because this is some pretty sweet specimens. I think we better start with a car wash first. Throughout this process, I had to keep reminding myself that this bike was completely submerged underwater for at least 6 months, if not a year. And it comes as no surprise that these bearings are just about gone. So in the interest of saving some money and parts, we're using some Evaporust to try and get rid of some of this oxidation. I may not be able to save everything, but hopefully most of the drivetrain will come out good. At this point in the teardown, I was finally able to see just how much rust was on the inside of this frame. It's not as bad as you'd think, but still not great. You can definitely see where there's oxidation on the inside and even on parts of the outside of the frame. So right here, I think it's wise to put out a huge disclaimer. This project is not a should you do it, it's a could you do it kind of project. Since we don't know the integrity of the frame anymore, this is not a bike I'll be giving away or wanting someone else to ride without some serious precautions. So here I am sanding down part of the frame on the outside where the rust was the worst. Part of this is just for fun, and it gives me a chance to try out my new pneumatic tools from Capri. On the inside, you'll see later where I'm going to spray some rust inhibitor to see if we can't stop some of the corrosion taking place. So I guess the thing that was the most surprising to me was, besides just having rust, there was a whole lot of silt that had worked its way inside of all of the weep holes and small open areas. And so while it looks like pure rust dust coming out, there was also a couple pounds of mud dried up and pure silt that just dumped out of this thing. So, besides knowing how to go into having to repaint part of this bike, this was a chance to use a new type of rust inhibitor. Again, a huge disclaimer here. This is by no means a perfect fix for a bike, and I certainly would not recommend this bike frame being used for anything serious anymore. But if you have to save an old frame, there is a number of different options for spraying a coating on the inside of the tubes. A long-standing product I recommend and have used before is called Problem Solver's Frame Saver. Here you can see we've come up with a funnel hose dispenser, since my can did not have a aerosol tube connection to it. So, while spraying inside of the funnel here, I was able to get a pretty decent blast of spray to come out the other end. I was able to then go inside of the bottom bracket, seat tube, and head tube, and run this inside of the tubes. Here I'm spraying on a primer and paint combo, also from Rust-Oleum. Again, nothing fancy here, just trying to put a good coat over the parts where I've sanded the rear frame. I waited about 15 minutes and applied a second coat after this. So probably the toughest part about this rebuild came down to the fork and the wheels. The fork was completely seized, and no amount of turning on the Allen bolts would let me release the lowers from the upper part of the fork. If you saw my other video about Huffy bikes, you'll know a little more of the backstory, as I was able to order in a replacement fork for only $40 with shipping. This was pretty incredible. It's not much more than a pogo stick, but the fact I was able to get a fork shipped in 4 days' time was amazing. And now onto the wheels. Despite having moss growing on the tires themselves, the biggest issue was, would the bearings be alright? And just looking at the rotor bolts gave me enough pause to wonder if I could even save these wheels. Not only were they rusted, but they were the softest steel metal I'd ever seen before. 2 of the bolts were so stuck, I had to go to my dad for some extra help cutting these off.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
It's got my name.
Vintage Earl, right there. Okay, so what do you call this tool?
So this is an impact driver.
So you smack it and it turns a quarter turn. There you go. So we didn't have to weld on a stick or nothing.
Nope.
Wow.
Ta-da.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
For the sake of time, I'll be blitzing through repacking the bearings here, but I just want to make the point that because these wheels had been fairly unused. It was the grease that saved it from total corrosion. And as you look at these bearings here, it is pretty red, nasty stuff. But the 1/4-inch bearings themselves held up well because they were packed so well with grease. People forget that even in the modern world with sealed cartridge bearings, you still have ball bearings inside of a sealed dust cover. Since many entry-level wheels don't have sealed cartridge bearings, it's important to remember that these still need service, and every few years ought to be repacked with fresh grease. Something I was surprised to find out from Huffy was that when I ordered the fork, it came with a race installed, and the steer tube length cut to the exact same length, of the same frame, of the same size. Nothing needed to be done. Just pull it out of the box, grease it up, and it was ready to go. So the funny thing about this project was one of my concerns was getting the moss off of the tires. You see, after power washing it for more than 10 minutes, the moss did not come off at all. So besides soap and water, scrubbing with abrasive material, I finally gave up and gave in to my inner pyro. You see, when the moss is dry, it comes off pretty good. With a little brush, the rest of it came right off. Pretty sweet. I wouldn't recommend it with your nice Maxxis tires, but on these guys, I'll let it pass. That is, without a doubt, the toughest bike I've ever worked on. Period. Again, I would not suggest this to anybody else. But if you had to, could you rescue a bike like this? And the answer is absolutely yes. Thanks everyone for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And don't forget to hit the notifications button so you know when the next video comes out. Thanks guys, we'll see you next week.